Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. Today is Tuesday, October 2nd, 2018. And tonight's topic is when the CIA paid close attention to gold and South Africa. First, before we get to our topic, let's take a look at the gold prices. So what you see on your screen there is the gold price. And the gold had a good day today, up almost 1.5%, up 1.27. It was a $15 increase. Opened up at 11.89, soared to 12.07, and dribbled down a bit to 12.04. And right now, this chart I made about a half hour ago, it's up a bit, so it's at 12.05. Now the silver had another nice day as well. In fact, silver was up a lot. It fell back. Silver at one point, I think, was up 3%. It had gotten almost to $15. It had gotten to $14.90, I believe. Let's see what we get when we get the chart up there. So gold was a good day, but silver had a real spike. Went all the way up to $14.89. And it fell back down to $14.70, but in the aftermarket, since I've taken this screenshot half hour or so ago, it's up another nickel, so it's at $14.75. So gold and silver, good days. Now, why did gold and silver spike today? Also, the dollar was up today as well. So what's going on? Well, you had trouble in Europe, particularly, specifically in Italy. Lots of problems going on in Italy. Remember, the euro is really the only other big block currency that has any chance of dethroning the dollar as a reserve currency, and it's got a lot of problems because it has more internal problems than the United States has. The individual states, half of them don't want to be in there, or half the people in half the states don't want to be in the EU. They've got debt problems in Italy. They want to print their own currency. So EU is a mess. And of course, a lot of people, I don't even know why people mention this, but they try to say China is going to have a world reserve currency. Not a chance. That is debt central. That is the global epicenter of debt. And they're having a lot of trouble right now. And only people who believe that are gold bugs, because they think somehow China is their gold buddy because they have gold. China is a mess in terms of credit and debt. That's how they run their economy, and they're having a lot of problems right now. But so the point is, the reason the dollar rose was because of the euro having trouble today. And it was nice to see silver make that spike along with gold, and in fact, better than gold for a while, although they both closed about the same percentage point upwards. But let's take a look at what that did for our gold-silver ratio. And you can see that at one point, gold-silver ratio, it opened up over 82, and when the spike hit, it went all the way down to 81. It's back up to about 82 now. So the gold-silver ratio coming down a bit, and it should. I've never said that the gold-silver ratio would never come down. I've just said that it's not going to 16 to 1. It's not going to 8 to 1. It's not going to 1 to 1. There is no natural ratio. The only way it would ever go that low would be, as some have suggested, that some unbelievable new demand came out for silver, that it was the only thing that you could possibly use, no substitutes, and massive demand, and somehow the supply had dried up. Otherwise, all things considered equal, there's no reason for the gold-silver ratio to be anywhere near 16 to 1. Other than perhaps for a brief shining moment if we get some type of ridiculous spike in both the metals. Say gold goes soaring up to $2,000–$3,000. Well, silver's such a small market, it might catch that explosion on the way up. But it's never sustained anything near 16 to 1 over the last 150 years. It's hit there almost a couple of times for a few minutes and then quickly fallen back. One other thing I want to look at before we get into our CIA topic, you know, a lot of waiting to hear about that, but let's just take a look at the gold versus the Dow Jones. The Dow hit another high today, up 122 points. And that is a record now, 26,773. What does that do to the Dow Jones versus the price of gold? Well, you can see they've, over the last, looks like year or so, they've intersected, and one's going down, the other's going up. But if you look at the Dow Jones, it's pretty much, since 2016, on a steady stream higher. Gold spiked in 2016. That's where you see that yellow line at the top there. It's holding above the Dow Jones. But basically, if you put $1 in 2016 and left it there, you'd be ahead of the game if you left it in the stock market. Now, a lot of people have been saying that they're expecting the stock market to crash. You know, I would imagine if the stock market does take a dive, you're going to see gold go higher, not just on a relative basis, but I would think the price of gold would go higher as well, and silver would eventually follow. All right, well, let's now take a look at cryptocurrencies for those of you tracking it. By the way, tomorrow I'm going to have on a special Litecoin guest. His name is John Moore, and he works with a payment system, and he's going to talk about how Litecoin is being used in the traditional payment systems. A lot of people say there's no use case for Bitcoin. What's the purpose? He's actually working with it in the field, so it'll be an interesting interview. I may not do a live stream tomorrow, depending on how much time I have, because I'm going to take some time out of the day to do that interview. But I may be back tomorrow night. But anyway, so Bitcoin 6507, pretty much unchanged over the last 24 hours. Bitcoin Cash, same deal, pretty much unchanged at 530. Ethereum, $224. That's down about 1.5%. And Litecoin down to 59.18, below 60. That's down about 1.5. And Ethereum Classic unchanged around $11.15. Now let's get into our topic of the evening. The evening's topic. Before I do that, I'm going to invite you to, if you are interested in buying gold or silver, it's not investment advice, but Smaulgld does have those affiliate arrangements, and it does help if you shop at the Smaulgld links, because Smaulgld gets a small commission, and you pay no more, no less than if you visited these sites directly, and you can compare pricing and shipping and the specials that they have. So I've got these affiliate arrangements with Golden Eagle Coin, Money Metals Exchange, and SD Bullion, so please check them out. All right, we're going to talk about patrons, Smaulgld patrons, later in the evening, but for now we're going to get into when the CIA paid close attention to gold in South Africa. Now, why would they even care about South Africa? Why would they care about gold? Well, it wasn't too long ago, or maybe it was, depending on your time frame, that gold was very important to the national security of the United States. Why? Because up until 1971, the United States was, under the Bretton Woods Agreement, issued a dollar that was backed by gold. Had to be backed by gold. And what does it mean to be backed by gold? Did it mean that you could walk into a bank and ask for gold with your money? No. You could go in with a silver certificate and get a silver dollar in 1965, 1969, but you could not go up to 1968, you can get a silver dollar. But you could not go in and get gold. The only entities that could get gold were the central banks that had signed the Bretton Woods Agreements of 1944. It was an agreement that they signed at the end of World War II. And under that agreement, signatories, if they had dollars and they had accumulated them, they can bring them to the United States and get themselves the gold. Why was the CIA interested in gold? Recently, a few years back, they declassified a lot of documents from the CIA. They do it from time to time. And I started pouring through the ones, doing searches for gold. And a lot of them were secret. This one in particular we're going to go through tonight. And I'll leave you a link. I've gone through a bunch of them and done blog posts. Some of them got put on Zero Hedge. But this one is interesting because a couple of things happened. First of all, just the idea that these documents are classified secret, which is the second highest classification that the CIA has. And if you have a document that's classified secret, it says, quote, the unauthorized disclosure of secret information would cause serious damage to national security. So these documents that I looked at used to be considered secret. I said, why would gold, anything about gold, be secret? Well, remember, the whole geopolitical, the whole concept of the United States being in charge of the world, in part had to do with being in charge of the world's reserve currency. And since it was backed by gold, they needed to know, the CIA needed to know what was going on in the gold market. And they needed to control the gold market. You think they control the gold market today? They do in some respects. But back then it was essential that the players that they wanted to control the market were the ones controlling it, and no one else could even attempt to control it. And they wanted to know who was producing gold and where it was going. And at the time you had a Cold War, and you had Russia, which was a major gold producer, but Russia was the Soviet Union, and so you didn't count their gold, so they had to keep tight control on their knowledge on the gold flows. And they had the London Gold Pool, as you know, in the late 60s, where they were trying to keep the price of gold at $35. Now, this was pretty much a very difficult thing to do, because the price of gold had been set at $35 by the Gold Act of Congress of 1934, signed by Franklin Roosevelt after he issued his executive order in 1933, nationalizing the gold supply, or the gold of the nation. And by 1937, he had melted it down and tossed it into what is now Fort Knox. So the United States was very concerned in the late 60s, and these CIA documents reflect that, because they realized that it was getting difficult to keep the price of gold at $35. Also, what they realized was they did not want to devalue the dollar and let the gold price go higher. So they were monitoring what was happening with the gold. Now, one of the things that they wanted to happen was they realized that there was going to be a dollar shortage, or they were going to have more gold produced. Well, which country was the largest gold producer back then? Well, it was South Africa. And South Africa was only important geopolitically because it was the major free world's gold producer. Number one gold producer. In the same way, once they switched over to the petrodollar, Saudi Arabia all of a sudden gained geopolitical significance. South Africa right now has none. Why? World isn't run on gold, and they don't have as much gold as they used to. But interestingly enough, back then, they were also talking about the special drawing rights. They were wondering if they could create something that would be a substitute not for the dollar, but they could settle international payment transactions that would lead to reduction in official gold movements. So they were concerned that there really wasn't enough what we'd call liquidity in the system back then. Remember, the U.S. couldn't just print dollars. They had to redeem them. So they thought that SDRs, special drawing rights, might be a way of providing liquidity. So what the CIA was worried about also at the time is not just how much gold. They used to track how much gold was coming onto market from South Africa or anywhere else. They needed to know that. But then they noticed, it's very interesting, they noticed that the manipulation of what they called the free market price, not the set $35 price, but they try to keep it around $35 even in the free market, was that they suspected the Swiss bullion dealers were influencing the London fix. And they were very concerned that the Swiss were manipulating the gold market in a way that they didn't like. So remember, Swiss at the time were even more independent. They weren't part of the IMF. They were this, in a sense, rogue nation. Also at the time, these documents revealed that South Africa sold a lot of its gold to the IMF. Now, at the time, the IMF still is. It was run largely by the United States. they realized that South Africa needed to sell a lot of gold, and they needed them to produce a lot of gold, and they needed to get the price they wanted. So the IMF agreed to buy a good portion of it. So a lot of gold at the IMF came from South Africa. So the IMF had entered into arrangements that allowed South Africa to sell its production at $35. They wanted them to produce a lot, but then they realized that they produced a lot, that free market price might go down. So they effectively offered them price protection against free market dips and helped keep that $35 price. And it said South Africa may sell gold to the IMF under certain conditions, but agrees to sell most of its newly mined output on the free market, because they really wanted to keep the price down there at the $35. With the agreement essentially provides a floor of $35 an ounce for South African gold. So that meant they were just going to produce as much as they could. It guarantees a free market supply large enough to keep the free market price at or near a floor at least through 1970. This was written in 1979. So the CIA clearly, this is not the CIA saying they've done anything. This is just a report. This is their, the way I'm reading it to you is what they would produce in their memo, so that people would know in the government what was happening in the gold market. And they were saying there's strong circumstantial evidence that Zurich bullion dealers under the leadership of the Union Bank of Switzerland are again manipulating the gold markets. London bullion dealers had hoped that the 1969 agreement between the IMF and South Africa would restore London as the focal point of the world gold market. It has not. So there was competition amongst this IMF London gold pool, South African gold agreement with the IMF versus what the Swiss were doing. And it says the present situation, however, implies effective control of free market supplies by the Swiss Commercial Bank. So they were concerned, they said, that if gold demand from industrial users and hoarders already exceeds free world output, and several less than interested individuals point to the inevitability, this is 1969, of the free market gold pricing rising to as much as $100 per ounce by 1980. So back then they thought the price of gold in a free market, because they didn't really have a free market because they were still on the gold standard, they tried to keep it at $35, but they saw it getting away from them, assuming the continuation of the Bretton Woods agreements. They thought it's going to be hard to keep the price of gold at $35 an ounce. Gasp, it might go to $100 in 1980. And then the memorandum also noted that the Union Bank of Switzerland was trying to induce speculative demand to force the price beyond $50 an ounce, because they are clearly desirous of, they were trying to recoup last year's losses because the price had dropped in the free market. So they saw that the, what they call the free market gold price was being manipulated by the Swiss, while the US, London, IMF, South Africa were working together to manipulate the price to $35. And then there was this free market gold that was going on outside of that. Now, the other interesting thing that I mentioned was about this special drawing rights. They noted, and again, the CIA didn't invent this special drawing rights. This was done at the IMF. I don't think the CIA did a lot of this stuff in conjunction with. I think they were monitoring what was going on. They noted that the trade was growing faster than the growth of reserves, and there wasn't enough gold production to meet the reserve requirements. So this is an issue very late in the Bretton Woods agreements in the late 60s. You've got massive trade, but because the price of gold hasn't risen, that means the value of your reserves haven't risen, even if you've added a lot of gold, because there's been inflation since 1934 up to 1970. So the CIA referred to the SDR, that's how they call the SDR, the special drawing rights, a new type of liquidity as permanent as gold itself to ensure increases in liquidity. The SDR, said the CIA memo, is a form of money and credit. SDRs cannot be extinguished by being exchanged for gold, they wrote. They can only be traded among central banks. It's something people don't realize. That's still the case today. And unlike gold, there are no private uses for SDRs that compete with their use as an international currency. Then they said in 1969, and they were right on this, nevertheless, SDRs are not soon likely to supplant the dollar in international monetary system. Foreign central banks need working balances which are presently denominated largely in dollars. That's exactly the case today. Say what you want, that the dollar is doomed. This is 1969, and they were saying foreign central banks need working balances which are presently denominated larger in dollars. Fast forward to 2018, I can state foreign central banks need working balances which are presently denominated largely in dollars, despite the fact that the dollar is no longer backed by gold. All right. Oh, by the way, before we take the questions, I didn't mention at the top, Silver Eagle sales. We're following those again intently because last month the U.S. Mint sold 2,897,500 American Silver Eagles in the month of September. They opened up October yesterday with 350,000. They tacked on another 195,000 today, so they're already at 545,000 American Silver Eagles sold. Okay, let's just take a look now at what the comments have been so far. Where are they at? There they are. All right. All right. Not me says, good evening, Lewis. Good evening. What every man should have says, oil is up 10% less than a month. Since 2015, it's an all-time high. Yeah, well, you know, you think the oil market is clearly manipulated. It's manipulated, and it's even easier to manipulate the oil market than it is the gold and silver market, because other than strategic stockpiles, oil is basically you mine it or you drill it, and then you refine it, and then you use it. It doesn't really sit around that much, and if they restrict production, then they can drive the price higher. Bob Silver just ordered 20 more ounces of silver. Brent Gray, concerns about nationalism of the South African mine has kept me away. Well, the South African mines also are amongst the least profitable. They're actually, many of them run at losses just because of the way they're run and also because they've grabbed all the low-hanging fruit for decades. Now I'm having concerns about the newly elected Mexican government. Yep, currently invested in First Majestic, one metal, one country. Yeah, mining is a tough business. It's very hard to run. You've got so much environmental, you've got so many governmental issues. There was one mine a few years back, I think it was Great Panther. Terrorist miners just raided the place, took it over, and started running it for like 3 weeks. They had to call in the Mexican police to remove them. It's a tough business. Artavis, isn't it interesting or strange that the Dow Jones has advanced 16,000 points in 9 years since, March 2009? That's all central bank driven. They decided in 2008, after the financial crisis, they were going to create a housing bubble, a stock market bubble, come hell or high water, and they were going to do it by printing money. And they intervened in the system, and that's what happens. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. And remember to pick up your Smaulgld mugs. I'll give you a link for that. And also, if you want it, that's the classic and super classic mugs. If you want other Smaulgld products, it does help out the site, but there are also some cool products. There's even a corkscrew, a Smaulgld corkscrew. You can get espresso mugs, travel mugs. But if you really want to help out Smaulgld, you can join I think we got 17 patrons now. Very happy for our patrons. You can become a Smaulgld patron. We have a mug club and a double mug club. If you join the Smaulgld mug club, you get a free Smaulgld classic mug as soon as you join. And if you join the double mug club for $50, you get both of them. I think the other two levels are $2 and $5. I think you get the proletariat level and the bourgeoisie levels. Those are smaller amounts that you can donate. Or you can donate directly via PayPal. You can make them rich because they take half the money. Or, as we've mentioned, I'm going to have a guy on tomorrow, John Moore, talking about Litecoin. One of the things about donating via Bitcoin or Litecoin is there's no transaction fee. There's very small. I mean, you lose a penny or two. Whereas if you were to send me $5 via PayPal, I get like $4.30. Someone sent me twice $1, and I got 62 cents both times. But if you send Bitcoin or Litecoin, and these are run through the payment system, then you don't lose anything. Now, the thing is, when you have Bitcoin or Litecoin, you lose or you gain based on where the price goes. Now, what I've done for most of the time that I've taken Bitcoin and Litecoin payments, I ran them through Coinbase. So if you sent me the equivalent of $15 of Bitcoin or Litecoin, Coinbase would convert it for me and credit my account $15. So unfortunately, back in 2015 and 16, people did send me Bitcoin often, but I had it converted, you know, when it was like $800, whatever the price was back then. So I only got the $15. But today, if I take the Bitcoin or Litecoin, I think I'm gonna keep the Bitcoin and Litecoin in the form that they have. So anyway, thank you very much for tuning in tonight and for your attention. Tomorrow we'll be back at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, hitting the like button or subscribe, and then you hit the bell so you get the notifications. Also subscribe to Smaulgld.com, because each day after this live stream I post the charts that were in the current podcast. And join us on gab.ai, Twitter, Facebook, Google+, Steemit, and minds.com. Thanks again.